That night, in the cold Colorado mountain wind, my father leaned in and whispered, "Be quiet. This family needs you to be agreeable." 5 minutes later, rotor blades ripped the sky open. A black helicopter landed on the Summit Club's lawn. The door opened. My grandfather, the man they thought was finished, held out his hand. "Get in. It's time to tell your side." From that moment, no one guessed the ending. My name is Quinn Delaney. I am a risk mitigation engineer for Stonebridge Dynamics. It is not a glamorous title, and it is not a glamorous job. My work is to find the single point of failure before it activates. I find the hairline fracture in the turbine blade before the wind picks up. I find the flaw in the load calculation for the suspension bridge. I find the bad data packet in the dam's telemetry feed that reports a safe water level when the reality is anything but. My job is to stare at complex systems until they confess their secrets, preventing disasters that only I knew were possible. I live this philosophy. My apartment in Denver is minimalist, but not in the way high-fashion magazines mean. It is not empty, it is edited. I own one good sofa, one solid desk, and a bed. I own books, mostly engineering manuals and structural reports. I prefer my possessions to be dependable. My favorite shoes are a pair of 10-year-old leather work boots. The treads are worn, the leather is creased, but the stitching is perfect. They are balanced. They have stood on concrete catwalks 400 feet above a river, on the vibrating floor of a generator housing, and in the mud of a compromised construction site. The step is what matters, not the shine. Miles Harrow is different. He is a product designer based in Boulder. He designs things to be beautiful, to feel right in the hand. He is kind, patient, and reliable. He listens more than he speaks. We met at a coffee shop near a testing facility, arguing over the ethics of planned obsolescence versus structural integrity. He found my rigidity interesting. I found his empathy for the end user refreshing. His family is not like him. Miles is a Harrow, and the Harrows are mountain elite. They are the kind of wealthy that does not announce itself with loud cars, but with quiet, sprawling influence. His mother is Evelyn Harrow. Her professional title is Political Image Consultant. What she really does is manufacture reality. She advises senators on how to hold a coffee cup to look relatable, and she guides corporate clients on which local charities to fund so that their environmental violations are overlooked. She is a woman made of polished marble and quiet calculations. Evelyn does not know who I am. She sees the quiet engineer from Denver, the minimalist girlfriend Miles brings to dinner. She does not see the granddaughter of Jonas Rourke. My grandfather is, or was, the energy magnate of Wyoming. He built an empire in renewable energy when everyone else was still drilling for oil. He is a man who sees the world in terms of kilowatt hours and long-term leverage. My mother, his daughter, cut ties with him and his world 20 years ago. She became a librarian and married my father, Patrick Delaney, my father. He resents the Rourke name. He blames Jonas for my mother's stubbornness, for her refusal to accept the easy life he felt she deserved, and by extension, the easy life he felt he deserved. My mother is gone now, but her voice is the only one I truly listen to. It is the operating system that runs beneath all my protocols. "Be kind, Quinn," she told me, her hands smelling of paper and glue from mending old books. "But don't you dare bow." The invitation to the fundraiser was not an invitation, it was a summons. It arrived on thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the logo of the Summit Ridge Club. It is a place built at 10,000 feet, where the air is thin and the price of entry is unspoken. It is where deals are finalized not in boardrooms, but over glasses of 25-year-old whiskey while looking down on the rest of the world. A place where every glance is a measurement, every handshake an assessment. My father called me the moment he heard Miles had invited me. His voice was thin, nervous. "Quinn, about this party, it's a big deal for Miles's family, so just be agreeable, no scenes. If they bring up politics, if they bring up business, you just stay quiet. Understand? They need to see you fit in. I understood perfectly. This was not a party. This was an audit, and I decided to conduct one of my own. I would be their experiment. I would show up as exactly who I am. I wore a simple, sand-colored wool dress that I bought 5 years ago. I wore my old, comfortable flat shoes, the ones with the reliable soles. I did not wear jewelry, save for my watch, the one I use for timing system checks. I carried my work bag, a heavy canvas messenger that holds my laptop, a high-density portable battery, and the hard-copy technical manuals I still prefer. I would not mention my real job title. I would not mention Stonebridge Dynamics. I would be Quinn, who works in technical services. The drive up to Summit Ridge was a climb into another atmosphere. The wind was a physical force, a high-pitched whine that sounded like it was trying to peel the trees from the mountainside. The club itself was not gaudy. It was overwhelming. It was built of massive, unpainted logs and riverstone, with windows 40 feet high that looked out onto the jagged peaks of the Gore Range. The air inside was warm and smelled of burning pine, old leather, and money. A piano played by itself in the corner. The sound of crystal glasses touching was sharp and clear in the thin air. It was the sound of a trial about to begin, one with no official record. Evelyn Harrow glided toward us. She was not walking. She was moving through the room like a localized weather system. She wore a dark blue dress that perfectly matched the twilight sky outside. Her smile was a precise, measured thing, aimed directly at Miles, but her eyes were on me. "Miles, darling," she said, kissing the air near his cheek. "And Quinn, how wonderful you could make it." She took my hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool. Her eyes did not just look at me, they scanned me, logging the wool dress, the flat shoes, the absence of a designer handbag. The assessment took perhaps 2 seconds. "Evelyn, thank you for having us," I said. "We are so thrilled. Miles mentioned you were in contracting? Some sort of technical field?" The dismissal was subtle, layered in politeness. "Risk mitigation," I said. "I check for safety compliance." "Ah," she said, her smile tightening just a fraction. "How fascinating. You must have been involved in that Routt County zoning incident last year. A fascinating bit of local negotiation." I did not flinch, but my pulse quickened by a single beat. The Routt County contract. It had been a wind farm project. The primary contractor, a favorite of Evelyn's political clients, had submitted faulty soil analysis reports, trying to rush foundation pouring before the winter freeze. Stonebridge had been called in for a third-party review. I was the one who found the discrepancy. I was the one who flagged the report, grounding the project for 6 weeks and costing the contractor millions in overruns. It made the local news for a day, a dry story about zoning delays. But Evelyn was looking at me now as if she knew I had been the anonymous engineer cited in the report. She knew, and she was pretending she did not. "I just read the public reports," I replied, keeping my voice level. "It sounded complex." Her smile never wavered. It was, "Now, you two must get a drink." She turned away, leaving me with the distinct feeling of having just been interrogated by a master. I was standing by the massive stone fireplace, watching the dynamics of the room, when my phone vibrated. It was not a call or a text. It was a haptic alert, a specific cadence I had programmed for only one system. I pulled it out, shielding the screen. My stomach tightened. It was a Priority 1 alert from the Stonebridge mainframe. Red banner, flashing. System, Aspen Dam, Project Sierra, alert. Sub-project spillway sensors. Data mismatch. Warning, manual override detected. I looked up. Evelyn was across the room, laughing with a state senator. Miles was trapped in conversation with a donor. No one knew. The Aspen Dam project, that was the one. The one Miles's design firm had consulted on, handling the public-facing interface for the Water Authority. The one he had been agonizing over 8 months ago. Convinced there was a flaw in the spillway sensor readings but unable to prove it. The one I had fixed, anonymously. I had spent a weekend diving into the public-facing source code, found a vulnerability, and routed an anonymous tip to the lead engineer, pointing to the exact line of code that was misinterpreting the sensor data. They had fixed it. But now, someone had overridden that fix, manually, tonight, and if that damn spillway failed, if they released the wrong amount of water based on bad data, the valley downstream. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. My childhood in Clearwater, Wyoming, was not measured in social seasons. It was measured in the cycles of machinery and the silence of the library. My world smelled of two things: the sharp, metallic tang of machine oil from the co-op garage where my father sometimes worked, and the dry, sweet scent of old paper and book glue from the county library where my mother, Ellen, was the head librarian. Clearwater was a town built on what you could fix with your own hands. My father, Patrick Delaney, was a man of restless, frustrated energy. He was always chasing the next sure thing, a trait that kept us perpetually on the edge of stability. He was charming in short bursts and resentful in long stretches. His greatest resentment was aimed at my grandfather, Jonas Rourke. Jonas would appear in Clearwater maybe twice a year, driving an unremarkable Ford truck that was, as my father always pointed out, probably armor-plated. He was a tall man, weathered by the Wyoming wind, with eyes that seemed to be looking at the horizon even when he was sitting across a Formica table. He was not a warm man, but he was a precise one. He would sit with me at the kitchen table, not with a storybook, but with a page torn from the financial reports of Rourke Renewables. He would point to a series of numbers, a cash flow statement. "See this, Quinn?" he'd say, his voice a low rumble. "This isn't money. This is a story. This number here, this outflow, that's a new shipment of turbines. This one, this smaller number, that's the maintenance budget. This one is the wind." He taught me to see patterns. He taught me that a budget was not just numbers. It was a map of someone's intentions. "People will tell you what they believe," he said, tapping the paper. "But the ledger tells you what they do. Look for the imbalance. That's where the risk is, or the lie." My father hated these lessons. He would stand in the doorway, his arms crossed, a sour look on his face. After Jonas left, the house would fill with his bitterness. "That's not teaching, Ellen," he'd yell. "That's recruitment. He's trying to buy her. He thinks he can buy everything. He buys loyalty. He buys silence." My mother, in her quiet way, was the counterbalance. She was the one who gave me the books on structural integrity, the histories of the great bridges and the great failures. She lived in a world of facts, but she governed it with empathy. She saw my father's frustration not as a flaw, but as a pain he could not articulate. She saw Jonas's precision not as coldness, but as the only way he knew how to control a world that had taken too much from him. The year I turned 13, my mother gave me a gift. It was not expensive. It was a simple, heavy, steel-cased ballpoint pen, the kind engineers used on drafting paper. She had taken it to the jeweler in the next town. Engraved on the side, in small, perfect letters, were 4 words: "Do right, fear nothing." "This is your compass, Quinn," she said, closing my hand around it. "Your grandfather will teach you to be smart. Your father will teach you how complicated love can be. But this is from me. Your brain will tell you what is efficient. Your heart will tell you what is kind. But your gut, that's where this lives. When you know what is right, you do it, and you do not fear the consequences." That pen became my anchor. When it came time for college, my father pushed for me to apply to the prestigious East Coast schools, the ones he could drop into conversation. He wanted me to use the Rourke name, to leverage the connection he claimed to despise. I refused. I applied to Colorado State for structural mechanics, and I got in on a full academic scholarship. I packed 2 suitcases and took a bus to Fort Collins. My father called my choice an insult. My grandfather sent a short, typed letter. "Good school, good program. Check your load-bearing calculations twice." Colorado State was an education in more than just physics. It was my first real encounter with the class system Evelyn Harrow now represented. The girls in my dorm came from Denver's wealthy suburbs. They wore clothes I had only seen in magazines, and they carried a casual, unthinking confidence. I showed up with my father's old duffel bag, my cheap, functional clothes, and my library of technical manuals. I was the scholarship kid. I was invisible at parties. I was the one they talked over in study groups. They saw the worn jeans and the scuffed boots, and they made their assessment. I learned quickly that arguing with them was pointless. Their opinions were as fixed as their trust funds. So I stopped trying. I let the work speak. When our team project for a bridge design competition stalled, I was the one who stayed up for 72 hours, running the fluid dynamics simulations, and found the harmonic resonance flaw that would have disqualified us. I did not present the findings. I simply slid the folder, filled with equations and annotated diagrams, in front of the team leader. I let the data argue for me. My internship was at a wind farm on the Eastern Plains. It was not a consulting internship in a high-rise. It was a steel-toed boots and hard hat job. I spent 3 months climbing turbine towers, my clipboard strapped to my belt, learning the language of the machinery. The lead maintenance chief, a man named Sal, taught me the most important lesson. We were standing on a catwalk, the wind so loud it was a physical pressure. "You hear that?" he yelled over the roar. I shook my head. "I hear the wind." "No, listen under it." He tapped the metal railing. "Every machine is always telling you its story. Most of it is just noise, just the sound of it doing its job. But you gotta learn to listen for the other thing, the sound that doesn't belong, the little tick, the whine that's half a note too high. That's metal fatigue. That's a bearing about to seize. That's the sound of trouble before it starts." I spent the rest of the summer listening. I learned to hear the noise of metal fatigue, and I learned to see it in the paperwork. Back in the site office, I was tasked with digitizing old service contracts. It was boring, mind-numbing work, but I started to see the same patterns Jonas had shown me. I saw a small, local farming co-op that had contracted with the wind company to lease their land. I read their agreement. Then I cross-referenced it with the main contractor's supply manifest and the site's acceptance reports. I found the discrepancy. It was tiny. A single line item in an appendix to Appendix C. The contractor was billing the co-op for grid integration and stabilization fees, a charge that, according to the master agreement I had read, was the sole responsibility of the power company. It was only a few $1,000s a month, but compounded over the 20-year lease, it was enough to bankrupt the co-op. It was not a structural failure, but it was a systemic one. It was a lie hidden in the noise. I did not know what to do. I was a 19-year-old intern. The contractor was a massive, multi-state corporation, but I thought of Sal, listening for the sound that did not belong. I thought of my mother's pen. I compiled the documents, the lease, the manifests, the acceptance reports. I highlighted the 3 relevant clauses. I did not write a memo. I did not make an accusation. I just laid the 2 conflicting pieces of data side by side and placed the folder on the site manager's desk. I never heard another word about it, but 2 weeks later, I saw the co-op president in the parking lot, shaking the site manager's hand, his face flooded with relief. The billing stopped. The co-op was saved. That was the day I became an engineer. I learned that a system is not just metal and code. A system is a contract. A system is a promise, and my job was to find the place where the promise was breaking. I developed the habit that defines my work. I do not just read the report. I read the footnotes. I read the appendices. I check the acceptance reports and the time logs. Because the lie is never on page 1. It is always buried. My mother died the winter of my junior year. A sudden, silent aneurysm. It was a systemic failure of a different kind. My father fell apart. He drank. He blamed Jonas for not being there, and then blamed him for showing up. He blamed my mother for leaving him. At the funeral, after my father had stumbled through a rambling, angry eulogy, Jonas stood up in the back. He did not come to the front. He just spoke into the silence of the small church. He told a story about my mother, at age 12, refusing to leave the local library during a blizzard until she had recatalogued the entire history section by hand, because the system was wrong. After, in the cold air of the cemetery, Jonas tried to talk to me. "Quinn, your father is not well. You should not be responsible for him. Come to Wyoming. I will take care of things." "Take care of things?" I said, my voice raw. "You mean buy them? Like you buy loyalty? Like you buy turbines?" He flinched. It was the first time I had ever seen him look truly unguarded. "Your mother." "My mother is gone," I said, my hand closing on the steel pen in my pocket. "And I am not her, and I am not you. I will not be defined by your money. I will not be a part of your world." I turned and walked away. I finished my degree. I got the job at Stonebridge Dynamics on my own. I built my life, my minimalist, edited, stable life. I cut off all contact with Jonas Rourke. He did not fight me. He let me go. But every year, on Christmas Eve, a postcard would appear in my mailbox. It was never a holiday card. It was always a photograph of some new, massive Rourke project. A field of solar panels in the desert. A geothermal plant in Iceland. On the back, there was never a message, just his initials. J.R. and a single, complex equation, a problem in load-bearing, or fluid dynamics, or risk modeling. It was, I understood, the only way he knew how to say hello. It was the only way he knew how to ask. "Are you still listening?" I met Miles Harrow on a Tuesday, in a cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial lubricant. The cafe was a squat brick building across the street from a rotor testing facility. You could feel the deep, subsonic thrum of the turbines testing their stress limits through the concrete floor. It was a sound I found comforting, the sound of systems under load. I was there reviewing a preliminary report on gearbox failures, my steel pen marking inconsistencies in the telemetry data. He was sketching on a tablet, his brows furrowed over a three-dimensional rendering of what looked like a hiking boot. He kept sighing, a noise of pure frustration, and erasing the design. Finally, he looked up and saw me watching. "It's the soul," he said, as if we were already in the middle of a conversation. "The marketing team wants this aggressive, angular tread, but it's wrong. It'll trap mud. Add half a pound, and throw off the wearer's gait. It looks strong, but it's weak. It's a failure point." I put down my pen. "But it will sell." He looked surprised, then nodded, resigned. "Yes, that's the problem." "The problem is the design serves the marketing, not the person," I said, tapping my own worn-out boot. "You're building an advertisement, not a tool." He stopped sketching and really looked at me. A slow smile spread across his face. "That's exactly it. You're an engineer." "How do you know?" "You said tool, not product. My name is Miles." That was how it started. A debate about designing for humans versus designing for perception. He talked about ergonomics, tactile feedback, and the joy of a well-balanced object. I talked about structural integrity, failure points, and mean time between failures. It should have been a collision of two different worlds, but it felt like finding a harmony. Our relationship built itself in the quiet spaces. Miles was the first person I had ever met who was not intimidated by my silence. He did not try to fill it with nervous chatter. He seemed to understand that my stillness was not emptiness. It was observation. He would talk about his day, his struggles with a design, the way the light hit the flat irons in the morning, and I would listen. He was not performing for me. He was processing. He was, I realized with a small shock, the kindest person I had ever known. In return, he listened to me, when I would finally speak, perhaps about a flawed hydraulic system or the precise mathematics of why a certain material would fail under cold weather stress. He did not glaze over. He would lean in. He would ask questions. "So, the stress is the real problem, not the material itself?" He tried to understand the system. We built unspoken rules. We lived in different worlds, and we respected that. I lived in Denver, in my edited apartment, surrounded by data. He lived in Boulder, in a clean, bright condo filled with prototypes, beautiful, functional objects, and shelves of design books. We never bragged. He never mentioned the price of the rare Japanese carbon steel in his kitchen knives or the high-end clients his firm courted. I never mentioned the billion-dollar infrastructure projects I was responsible for safeguarding, or the fact that my signature could halt the construction of a power plant. We talked about the work, not the scale. We also never asked about family. It was a mutual, unspoken pact. I sensed a weight around the subject when he spoke, a subtle tensing of his shoulders when his phone buzzed with a call from Evelyn, and he sensed, I am sure, that my past was a locked room I was not ready to open. We existed in the present, a self-contained system of two. It was safe. It was simple. About 8 months into our relationship, he hit a wall. His firm had taken on a consulting role for the Aspen Dam project. It was a public interface project, designing the new control room and the digital dashboard for the water authority. He was miserable. He kept coming back to it, night after night, pacing his condo. "It's the data. Quinn," he said, running his hands through his hair. "Something's wrong with the sensor feed. The engineers at the water authority say the system is fine, that the numbers are stable, but they feel wrong. They're too stable. It doesn't match the spring melt-off data. But I'm just the design guy. They told me to stick to the color palette." He was right to be worried. A system that is too stable is often a system that is lying. It means the sensor is stuck, or the code is reporting a cached number instead of a live reading. I did not tell him I had access to the public-facing source code for the project. It was part of a statewide infrastructure review. I did not tell him I could see the same data he could. I just listened. That weekend, while he was hiking in the mountains, I sat down at my desk. I pulled the code. It took me about 4 hours. The error was not in the sensor. It was in the code interpreting the sensor's data. A junior programmer had used a static variable where a dynamic one was required. The dashboard was refreshing the same number every 90 seconds, not pulling a new one, a catastrophic failure waiting to happen, masked by a beautiful, user-friendly interface. I picked up the steel pen from my desk. "Do right. Fear nothing." I created a disposable, anonymous email address. I wrote 2 sentences. Aspen Dam Project Sierra. Check line 4082 of the primary sensor module. Your variable for current level is static, not dynamic. You are reading cached data. I sent it to the public-facing email of the project's lead engineer. I did not sign it. I deleted the account. 2 days later, Miles met me for dinner. He was exhausted but beaming, his eyes bright for the first time in weeks. "You won't believe it," he said, ordering a celebratory beer. Some anonymous whistleblower found a massive bug in the dam's code, a total coding error. They fixed it. The real-time data is flooding in, and it's chaotic. It's beautiful. I knew it was wrong. I smiled and lifted my water glass. "I'm glad you figured it out." "I didn't," he said, his smile fading slightly. "But whoever it was, they saved the project, maybe saved the whole valley." I let the topic change. The fix was the thing that mattered, not the credit. The first time he mentioned his mother in detail, it was after that incident. He was feeling confident, successful. "My mother wants to meet you, officially," he said, then immediately cringed, as if he'd touched something hot. "Officially?" She's Evelyn," he sighed. "My mom. She curates everything. Her life, my dad's life. Our family exists to be seen from the right angle. She throws these parties, these fundraisers, and they're not parties. They're productions. She's an image consultant, which means she's always checking for flaws in her own." "And I'm a flaw?" "No," he said, grabbing my hand, his grip suddenly tight. "No, you're real. That's what worries me. She won't know what to do with you. She'll want a photo for her social media. Miles and his lovely, appropriate girlfriend. She's already asked why I never post pictures of you. I had seen his social media. It was a polished feed of beautiful hikes, artful product shots, and smiling, perfect-looking people at what looked like charity galas. I had no place there. I prefer to be offline, I said. It was the truth. In my line of work, anonymity is a feature, not a bug. If I'm not in the picture, I can't be misquoted. He laughed, but it was a nervous sound. God, Evelyn's going to love that. My own family, or what was left of it, had a different reaction. I had mentioned Miles's name to my father in one of our brief, obligatory phone calls. Patrick Delaney's interest, when it finally sparked, was sharp and transactional. Wait, he said, his voice suddenly sober and focused, cutting through the usual static of his complaints. Harrow? As in Charles Harrow, the one with the Summit Ridge development? That's his family? I think so. Dad, I don't really pay attention. Quinn, he said, and I could hear the lean in, the sudden, hungry focus. This is good. This is really good. You know, a connection like that, that's an opening. That's the kind of door that changes a person's life. You play this right. Quinn, you be nice. You be whatever they want. A cold, familiar sickness rose in my throat. The shame of his desperation, the way he saw the world as a series of doors to be unlocked, with me as a potential key. I'm his girlfriend, Dad, not his lobbyist. Don't be naive, he snapped, his old frustration returning. Don't pull that Rourke stubbornness on me. Your mother, God rest her, she never understood. You don't have to be them. You just have to use them. This is your chance. Don't blow it. I have to go. Dad, a system check. Quinn, wait. I hung up. I was uncomfortable, but I filed it away. It was just Patrick being Patrick. It was just noise. Then, the invitation arrived. Not a text, not an email, a physical object, thick, creamy, embossed cardstock, the Summit Ridge Club, a fundraiser for Evelyn's Clean Mountain Fund. Miles presented it like a peace offering and also like a grenade. So, this is the big one, he said, not meeting my eyes. My mother's annual thing, it's important to her, and she really wants to meet you. It felt like a summons. It felt like my father's transactional hope and Miles's mother's critical assessment were converging on me. My phone buzzed. My father. He must have heard. I silenced it. I'll go, I said. Miles looked relieved. Great. It's great. It'll be fine. It's just a party. We should find you a dress. I have a dress, I said. I went to my closet. I bypassed the few professional sheath dresses I owned. I bypassed the black suit. I pulled out a simple, sand-colored wool dress. It was 5 years old. It had no designer name. It was warm, functional, and completely unpretentious. It was me. I would wear that. I would wear my old, flat shoes, the ones with the reliable soles that had walked on catwalks and construction sites. And I would bring my bag, my heavy canvas document bag. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of my apartment. I was not going there to be assessed. I was going there to conduct an assessment. This was a test of their system. My mother's voice, clear as day. Be kind, but don't you dare bow. I knew, with the certainty of a load-bearing calculation, that this invitation was not a kindness. It was a test of my character, not my checking account. They wanted to see if I would fit. They wanted to see if I would bend. I packed my laptop, my spare battery, and my steel pen into the bag. I knew, with absolute certainty, that they were about to fail their own test, and I would not. The grand hall of the Summit Ridge Club was a masterpiece of controlled nature. The logs were not just wood. They were massive, perfect cylinders of honey-colored pine, each one identical to the next. The fireplace was not just stone. It was a towering wall of hand-cut gray river rock, the flames inside dancing at a precise, consistent height. A piano in the corner played a complex jazz piece, the keys moving with flawless precision, untouched by human hands. It was all perfect, sterile, and cold. It was the soundstage for a performance. We were led to a long table, the centerpiece a spray of pine boughs and white orchids that looked both rustic and impossibly expensive. Evelyn Harrow directed the seating, a general placing her troops. Miles was seated between two state senators. I was placed between my father and Evelyn's husband, Charles Harrow. It was not an accident. It was quarantine. Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table. Her smile was a thin, bright blade. It never reached her eyes, which were busy scanning the room, logging data. As she sat, those eyes did a final, rapid audit of me. They moved from my wool dress, to my flat shoes, to my empty wrists, and finally to my canvas bag, which sat on the floor by my chair. Her smile tightened by a millimeter. The assessment was complete. I had failed. Charles Harrow, to my left, leaned in. He smelled of expensive scotch and faint, peppery cologne. "So," he said, his voice a low, confident boom. He did not offer a handshake this time. He was opening negotiations. "Miles tells us you're in technical services." "I work in risk mitigation, Mr. Harrow." "Charles, please." He picked up a heavy silver fork, testing its weight. "Risk. That's a fascinating word. In my world, risk is just the cost of entry. You mitigate it by making sure you're the one holding all the cards." He gave a short, sharp laugh, as if he'd told a profound joke. The first course arrived, a single, perfect scallop on a bed of something dark and artful. The interrogation began, masked as polite dinner conversation. It was led by Evelyn, her voice carrying down the table, a clear, high-frequency signal. "Miles is just thriving, isn't he? Charles?" she called out. "His new line of outdoor furniture is being fast-tracked by the Boulder Design Group. We're so proud." She turned her gaze to me. "It must be so different, in your line of work. Quinn, what's the salary cap on that sort of position, really?" My father, beside me, stiffened. I could feel his sudden intake of breath. "I find the compensation is fair, Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet, forcing them to lean in slightly. "But the housing," a woman across from me, draped in diamonds, chimed in. "Denver is just impossible, isn't it? I assume you're renting. It's so hard for young people to build any real equity." "I find my situation to be stable," I said. My father kicked my ankle under the table, a short, sharp tap. "Be agreeable." Evelyn smiled, the expression of a predator closing in. "And your company, Stonebridge Dynamics? I've never heard of it. It must be such a struggle. A small firm like that, trying to compete. I imagine you're quite busy, trying to stay afloat." This was the attack, the calculated, public diminishment. She was painting me as a struggling, low-earning renter from a no-name company. She was defining my value for the table. I put my fork down, the silver ringing softly against the porcelain. "We prioritize safety over flash," I said, meeting her gaze. "Our work is to find the flaws in systems before they fail. We're not in the business of competing. We're in the business of being right. People's lives depend on it." The table went quiet. Charles Harrow stopped his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, a new, sharp interest in his eyes. He had recognized the language of power, just not the kind he was used to. My father kicked me again, harder this time. "You're failing. Stop." He was visibly pale, a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He leaned toward me, his smile fixed and desperate. "Quinn has a very technical mind," he said to Charles, a note of apology in his voice. "She loves her numbers." He was trying to repackage me as a harmless eccentric. Evelyn's smile was gone, replaced by a smooth, cold mask. "Of course," she said. The conversation shifted, steered by Evelyn into safer waters. She began to talk about her foundation, the Clean Mountain Fund, the very reason for this expensive gathering. A portly man, one of the senators, raised his glass. "To Evelyn, The Clean Mountain Fund is a miracle of public-private partnership. The work you've done guiding the new water resource contracts is simply brilliant. We just try to help, Evelyn said, a perfect note of humility in her voice. We provide the consulting to help these wonderful resource companies navigate the community's expectations. I heard a low chuckle from a man seated further down, a donor in a tweed jacket. He was speaking to his neighbor, but the acoustics of the high-ceilinged room carried his words. Consulting. He, $500,000 in consulting fees last quarter. That's a hell of a navigation. My father took a long, fast drink of his wine. Another man, this one from a local bank, leaned in. It's worth it. Summit Utilities got their preliminary approval in record time. Summit Utilities. The name hit me like a physical shock. Summit Utilities, the primary contractor on a hydroelectric project I had flagged for risk 6 months ago. Their data was sloppy, their maintenance logs were incomplete, and their emergency protocols were based on outdated floodplain models. My report had recommended a full stop work order until a comprehensive, independent audit was performed. Stonebridge had sent the report. Summit Utilities had responded by hiring a high-powered law firm, and the dispute was now buried in arbitration. And now, here they were, being praised for their work, guided by Evelyn's consulting. It was a system, a closed loop. The lie wasn't buried in an appendix, it was the guest of honor. My phone, in my lap, vibrated, the specific 3-pulse cadence of a high-priority system alert. Not the Aspen Dam again. I slid it out, hiding it below the table line. My father saw the movement and his eyes widened in panic. Put it away. I ignored him. I angled the screen. It was not Aspen. It was worse. It was a new alert, linked to the Aspen project. Project Sierra. Subproject. Hillside Dam, B. Auxiliary. Alert. Sensor cluster, 4. Data mismatch. Manual override detected. Warning. Downstream flow models predict catastrophic failure if auxiliary spillway is engaged based on current false telemetry, immediate risk, Lower Valley residential zone. My blood went cold. This was not the main dam. This was the auxiliary dam, the small, secondary reservoir high in the hills above the main one, the one that was supposed to act as an emergency relief. Someone was in the system, right now, falsifying the data for the relief dam. They were not just ignoring a problem, they were actively creating one. If they released the water tonight, under the wrong assumptions, it would not just be a flood, it would be a directed surge into the valley towns. I looked up from my phone. My head was ringing. Evelyn was smiling, her hands clasped on the table. It's all about partnerships, she was saying, her voice a warm, reasonable purr. And we are just so thrilled to announce that tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., we and Summit Utilities will be signing the new Regional Water Compact. It's a new day for Colorado. The room broke into applause. The pieces slammed together in my head. The sloppy contractor, the consulting fees, the manual override, the signing tomorrow morning. They were not just hiding a flaw. They were covering it up by creating a new flaw, a separate crisis, one they could manage. Or maybe they were intentionally lowering the auxiliary dam's level tonight, based on false data, to make room for a surprise overflow from the main one. They were manipulating the system, a system of concrete, steel, and water. My father had seen my face. He leaned in so close his chin was almost on my shoulder. His whisper was sharp, desperate, and cold. I don't know what you are thinking, Quinn, but I am telling you to stop. Look at these people. This is not your fight. You will not ruin this. Don't say anything. Sit still. My father's whisper was a cage. Sit still. The command was absolute. For a full 5 seconds, I obeyed. I sat in the warmth, surrounded by the smell of pine and roasted meat, a glass of expensive wine breathing at my elbow. I logged the inputs. My father's white-knuckled grip on his fork, his shallow breathing, the alert on my phone, a silent, pulsing warning of a valley at risk, Evelyn's triumphant smile. A system under catastrophic stress. I picked up my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. My father's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated panic. Quinn, gum. Excuse me, I said to the table at large, my voice perfectly level. I'm sorry. Charles, Evelyn, the team at one of my work sites is trying to reach me. We're managing a pressure variance. I just need to make a quick call. Charles Harrow looked annoyed at the interruption. Evelyn's smile became a mask of concern. Oh, dear. Nothing serious. I hope? That's what I'm going to find out, I said. I'll just find a quiet room. I did not wait for a reply. I walked away from the table, my canvas bag in my hand, my footsteps silent on the thick rugs. I could feel my father's desperate gaze boring into my back. I did not turn. I bypassed the main hallway and pushed open a set of tall, dark wood doors. It was a library. Of course, dark leather, glass-fronted cases, the smell of old paper and furniture polish. It was a room designed for the appearance of scholarship, not the practice of it. It was silent and, most importantly, empty. I did not turn on the main lights. I set my bag on a massive mahogany desk, flipped open my laptop, and sat in a leather chair that hissed under my weight. I did not bother with the club's public Wi-Fi. It would be slow, firewalled, and monitored. I pulled a small, black dongle from my bag, a dedicated cellular high-speed modem, and plugged it in. My laptop came to life, the screen a stark blue in the dark room. I was not just calling a worksite, I was going to war. I bypassed the standard login. I held my phone over the screen, using a two-factor authentication app that generated a one-time key based on the screen's strobing light. Then, I entered my emergency override code, a 32-character alphanumeric string that gave me, as a lead mitigation engineer, top-tier access to the Stonebridge internal mainframe. The dashboard loaded. I was no longer in a cozy mountain library. I was in the system. I pulled the active file for the Summit Utilities arbitration. My report from 6 months ago was the top document, flagged in red. Below it, a long chain of restricted access correspondence. I opened it. It was not just emails. It was a secured internal chat log between a senior vice president at Summit Utilities and a project manager at the Clean Mountain Fund, Evelyn's fund. I scrolled. The language was corporate, sterile, and damning. Summit VP. Evelyn, the initial community feedback on the Sierra project is trending negative. The concerns from the Stonebridge report are holding up the compact. CMF Manager. We are engaging. We suggest a pivot in the data presentation. We need to adjust the indicators for community perception. Summit VP. What kind of adjustment? CMF Manager. We will be packaging a new community impact metric, focusing on recreational access. This will supplant the risk and mitigation metric in the public-facing reports. We are streamlining the data for easier public consumption. Streamlining the data. The same phrase from the Aspen project. They were not just ignoring the risk, they were actively hiding it, burying my report under a mountain of marketing-driven bullshit about fishing and hiking trails. I kept digging. There was a contract, an invoice for consulting services, attached to the chat log. The invoice was for $200,000, paid by Summit Utilities. The recipient's name, the service provider, was redacted, a thick black line, a lazy attempt at corporate secrecy. But they had been sloppy. In the digital appendix, the PDF's metadata had not been properly scrubbed. I opened the Properties panel. The author field was blank, but the company field read, Harrow, Strategic. And then, I found the full service agreement in a subfolder, an appendix, Appendix B, Image Consulting, the company number, the federal tax ID. I ran a quick parallel search on the public database of Colorado corporations. The tax ID matched Harrow Strategic Imaging, LLC, President, Evelyn Harrow. She was not just a consultant. She was the one designing the lie. She was being paid by the utility to use her charity as a front, to manipulate public opinion and bury the technical risk report that I personally had authored. A sound at the door, a shadow, then a click as the door shut. I did not jump. I just looked up from the screen. My father was standing there, his face ashen, his suit jacket rumpled. He looked old and terrified. "They're calling for dessert," he whispered, his voice cracking. He did not look at my screen. He looked at me, with a kind of sick dread. "I'm busy, Dad." "Quinn." He walked toward the desk, his hands clasped in front of him, ringing. This is not your business. This is how the world works. You don't know what you're doing. You're a good kid. You're smart. But this is not a problem from one of your books." "It's a problem in a system," I said, my voice cold and low. "That makes it exactly my business. Summit Utilities is paying Evelyn, through her charity, to bury a risk report I wrote, a report that warns about a potential dam failure." He flinched, a full-body recoil. She just talks. She smooths things over. It's PR. It's not real." "It's real," I said, turning back to the screen. "And it's a federal crime, conspiracy, wire fraud. Take your pick." "Quinn, stop." His voice was a plea. He put his hand on the laptop screen, as if he could physically stop the data. "Please, for me, just let it go. Come back to the table. Smile. We'll leave after coffee. We'll never see them again. But you have to be quiet. Tonight." I looked at his hand, trembling against the screen. I looked at his face, a mask of weak, desperate fear. This was not the concern of a father. This was the panic of a co-conspirator. "Who do you owe, Dad?" He recoiled, pulling his hand back as if I had burned him. What are you talking about? I'm trying to protect you." "No, you're not," I said. "You've been nervous for weeks. You were sweating before we even sat down. You kicked me under the table. You're not scared for me. You're scared of me. You're compromised. How much?" It's not like that." "How much?" He looked away, staring at a priceless painting of a dead pheasant on the wall. Charles, he helped with a bad investment, a misunderstanding. He made some calls. It's fine." "A bad investment? You mean gambling?" His eyes snapped back to me, filled with rage and shame. "You don't know anything. You, with your perfect, clean little life, your scholarship, your mother's stubbornness. Some of us get messy." He helped me, and all she asked, was for me to make sure my daughter, the engineer, was agreeable, that she didn't come here and start asking questions. He was a pawn. They had bought my father's silence, and his job was to deliver mine. "Get out, Dad." "Quinn, please. Get out." He stared at me for a moment, his face collapsing. He was a weak man, and he knew I had just seen the final, definitive proof. He turned, and he left, closing the door softly behind him. I was alone again. My hands were perfectly steady. The anger was a cold, clean fuel. I was not done. They were hiding my report. That was a legal problem. But the alert on my phone, that was a public safety problem. The two were connected. I had to find the link. I went back to the mainframe. I bypassed the arbitration files and went straight to the live, statewide infrastructure grid. I pulled the schematics for the Sierra project, all subprojects. I had to see what they were signing tomorrow. I found the compact, the Regional Water Compact being signed at 9 a.m. I downloaded the 30-page draft from 3 months ago. Then I searched the state legislative server for the final version, the one submitted for the signing. I found it. It had been uploaded at 5 p.m. today. I opened both documents side by side. I ran a compare and contrast protocol. Most of it was boilerplate, legal jargon, recreational access clauses. Then I got to Section 12, Downstream Community Protections and Compensation Fund. In the draft from 3 months ago, The fund was capitalized at $40 million, a standard, negotiated sum, based on my original risk report, to protect the property values and insurance rates of the 5,000 people in the valley below. In the final version, the version uploaded today, the section had been rewritten. The $40 million was gone. It had been replaced by a new clause, a fund, yes, but capitalized at a baseline of $2 million with additional funds. Subject to annual review, it was a reduction of 95%. They had gutted the compensation. They had removed the safety net. I looked at the clock on my screen. 8:15 p.m. I pulled the file's internal change log. I wanted to see who signed off on this. The final authorization for the change to Section 12. It was time-stamped. 7:42 p.m. tonight. While we were eating our scallops, while Evelyn was scanning my dress, while my father was telling me to be agreeable, someone, somewhere, had logged in and digitally signed off on gutting the compensation fund for an entire valley. I knew. With the certainty of an engineer seeing a load-bearing wall crack, I knew. The alert on my phone, the manual override on the auxiliary dam. They were not just covering up a potential failure. They were engineering one, a small, manageable failure. They would use the false data to trigger a minor, unforeseen release from the auxiliary dam tonight, a small flood, enough to cause a panic, enough to be a crisis, but not enough to trigger a full investigation, and in the chaos, tomorrow, they would sign the compact. And when the real problems with the main dam, the ones in my report, surfaced, the compensation fund would already be drained, the liability already capped. They needed my silence. My father's job was to keep me quiet for just 12 hours. I opened my canvas bag. I took out my wallet. From a hidden sleeve, I pulled a black, encrypted USB drive. I plugged it into the laptop. I copied everything, the email chain, the metadata, the unredacted contract, the 2 versions of the compact, the time-stamped changelog. I made a separate, secured copy of the live data from the auxiliary dam's false sensors. I ejected the drive and slipped it into the small, zipped pocket of my document bag. I shut down the laptop. I stood up, the leather chair sighing again. I walked to the door. I could hear the party outside, the high, thin sound of laughter, the clink of glasses. I walked back to the table. My father would not look at me. He was staring at his plate, his face gray. Miles looked relieved. "Quinn, you're back. Is everything okay?" "It's stable, Miles," I said, sitting down. As I took my seat, Evelyn leaned toward me from the head of the table. Her face was a perfect, smooth mask of hostess concern. "I'm so glad your work crisis was resolved. Quinn," she said, her voice dripping with faux empathy, "you have such a calm demeanor. To handle such stress and return to us so composed, it's very admirable." I picked up my water glass. I looked her directly in the eyes. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, and I smiled. "It's all about knowing exactly what the system is doing." She held my gaze for a beat, her own smile unwavering, but I saw it, a flicker, a tiny micro-calculation. She knew I was not the person she had assessed. A low, deep rumble shook the massive windows. It was not a helicopter, it was thunder, rolling down the high-altitude valley. The piano music paused for a half-second. I looked past Evelyn, out the 40-foot glass wall. The air was no longer clear. The first hard, white flakes of snow were beginning to drive against the glass. The long night was just getting started. Dessert was being served, a delicate, spun sugar cage over a lemon tart. It was the kind of food designed to be admired, not eaten. The storm outside had intensified. The wind was no longer a whisper. It was a howl, a raw, serrated sound against the massive windows. The perfect automated piano music had been turned up slightly to compensate, a tinny layer of denial against the force of nature. Evelyn had been watching me, her head tilted, ever since I returned to the table. She had been waiting, calculating her next move. My smile, my calm, had been an unexpected variable. She was a woman who hated unexpected variables. She decided, then, to eliminate me from the equation. She waited for a lull, a moment when the senator had just finished a story and the table was quiet, expectant. "Quinn, dear," she said, her voice cutting through the room with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. It was warm, concerned, and utterly false. She made sure everyone was listening. "Now that you're back and your work is settled, I've been meaning to speak to you." Miles, beside me, went rigid. He sensed the attack before it launched. Evelyn gave a small, self-deprecating laugh, a gesture to include the other women at the table. "As Miles's partner, we're so thrilled to have you, of course, and you'll be attending so many more of these events with us. It's a different world, I know. It can be overwhelming." She leaned forward, her eyes radiating manufactured kindness. "I would love to help. I have a wonderful stylist I use, a woman who truly understands presentation. I was thinking, I'd like to offer you a small stipend, just to help you build a more appropriate wardrobe." The silence at the table was no longer polite. It was absolute, a vacuum. "Nothing grand," she continued, enjoying the moment, enjoying the power of her performance. "Just a little something to get you started. Say $700 a month, just to help you feel more comfortable." It was a masterpiece of aggression. In one move, she had publicly declared me a charity case, a poor, badly dressed, inappropriate burden. She had reduced me to a project, a fixer-upper. She was not offering help. She was asserting dominance. She was telling me, and her entire audience, that I was worthless as I was. I saw my father, his face gray, sink lower in his chair, his eyes fixed on his plate. He looked like a man bracing for a physical blow. Miles was a statue, his face pale, trapped between his mother's smiling cruelty and me. I took a slow breath, letting the thin, cold mountain air fill my lungs. I set my dessert spoon down on the plate, very gently. "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried in the dead silence. "That's an exceptionally generous offer." She smiled, a small, victorious tilt of her lips. She had won. "But I'll have to decline," I said. The smile froze. "Oh, but dear," she started, the warmth turning brittle. "I just mean—" "No, thank you," I said, a little firmer, but still perfectly polite. I met her gaze and did not look away. $700 is a significant amount of money, but I find I'm quite comfortable. I've always managed to buy my own self-respect, and I find it's the one thing that never goes out of style. The woman in diamonds gasped. The senator's eyebrows shot up. Charles Harrow looked at me as if I had just spit on the floor. My father lunged into the void, his voice a strained, desperate hiss. "Quinn, for God's sake, apologize to Evelyn. She was just being nice." He turned to Evelyn, his hands held up in a pleading gesture. She's just tired. She doesn't mean it. Evelyn, please." "Dad," I said, not looking at him, "I am not tired." You stubborn," he stammered, his face turning a mottled red. "You're just like your mother. You are ruining this. I am telling you, do not cause trouble. Be quiet. Just please, be quiet." I turned my gaze to Miles. He was the one I had come with. He was the one who held my hand. He was staring at his plate. He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate, agonizing conflict. He saw his mother's icy, expectant glare. He saw my calm, unwavering stare. He saw his father's barely controlled rage. "Quinn," he said, his voice so low I could barely hear it. "Mom, I mean, maybe this isn't the time. It's just a party. It's the storm. Everyone's on edge." He was looking for a truce. He was trying to placate, to smooth, to manage. He was trying to find a middle ground between a blatant act of aggression and a simple statement of truth. And in that moment, his family's deep, reflexive training, the lifetime of managing Evelyn's image, of smoothing over Charles's anger, won, his conscience, his loyalty to me, was overridden by his core programming. He was not my partner. He was their son. He had failed. The tension was a physical thing, a high-pitched whine in the air. It was Charles Harrow who broke it. He was not a subtle man. He saw a problem, and he bulldozed it. "Enough of this nonsense," he boomed, waving his hand dismissively as if to clear the air of my insolence. He turned to the banker beside him. "What really matters is tomorrow. That's the real win. To the compact. Isn't that right, Jim?" The banker, Jim, relieved to have the spotlight off the social conflict, laughed too loudly. He was flushed with wine and the success of the evening. "You're damn right, Charles, to the compact." He raised his glass, then leaned in conspiratorially, his voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "And I'll tell you what, my clients at the Clear Mountain Sludge Processing Plant are going to the moon on this. Once that water compact is signed and Summit gets the green light, our stock will fly. It's a guaranteed 10-bagger. Sludge processing, the industrial byproduct, the unglamorous, necessary, and highly profitable back end of a massive water utility deal. Another data point, another piece of the system." I let his words hang in the air. I let the table absorb the raw, unfiltered greed. Then, slowly, I reached down. I grasped the handle of my heavy canvas document bag. I lifted it, and I placed it on the pristine, white linen tablecloth, next to my half-eaten dessert. It landed with a soft, heavy, undeniable thud. The sound was an explosion in the quiet room. It was the sound of work. It was the sound of data. It was the sound of a system failure about to be announced. One of the guests, startled, knocked his fork against his plate. The sharp clang of silver on porcelain sounded like a gunshot. The entire table, all 20 guests, stared at the bag. "Is that right?" I asked. My voice was no longer polite. It was cold. It was precise. It was the voice I used on site, right before I shut a project down. I looked directly at the banker. "The sludge company stock? That's a fascinating variable. Because I was just in the library, I had to resolve a work issue, and I just happened to see the final, time-stamped log for the compensation fund adjustment on the Sierra project." The room stopped breathing. The banker's smile evaporated, replaced by a pasty, confused expression. "Quinn?" My father's voice. It was not a plea this time. It was a low, desperate growl, a final warning. I ignored him. My gaze moved from the banker to Evelyn. She was a professional. Her recovery was instantaneous. She sat up, her spine straight, and she composed her face into a mask of thin, sharp civility, a smile that did not touch her eyes, the smile of a predator that has just been challenged for the kill. "Quinn," she said, her voice smooth as ice, "I am afraid I don't understand what you are implying. Are you making an accusation? Here, in our home? At our table?" She was good. She was framing me as the hysterical, ungrateful guest, the lunatic. "I'm not implying anything, Evelyn," I said, resting my hand on the canvas of my bag. "And I'm not accusing anyone. I'm a risk engineer. I don't trade in accusations. I trade in documented facts." I looked around the table, at the senators, the bankers, the donors. "I'm stating that the data shows the compensation fund for the 5,000 people in the valley below the dam, the fund meant to protect them from the very risks my report identified, was reduced by 95%. "That's a business negotiation," Charles Harrow boomed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "A negotiation that was finalized at 7:42 p.m. tonight," I continued, my voice cutting through his, "while we were eating our appetizers, and it's a fascinating coincidence, because at almost the same time, the sensors at the auxiliary dam, the only thing protecting that same valley, were manually overridden with false data." Evelyn's mask of civility did not just crack, it shattered. The blood drained from her face. She knew, in that instant, that I had seen the whole system, the fix, the payoff, the manufactured crisis. "I'm not accusing you, Evelyn," I said, answering her question. I'm accusing the data of being distorted. I'm accusing the system of being deliberately and dangerously compromised. As for who did it, the documents will answer that. That was when Charles Harrow exploded. He slammed both hands on the table, rattling the crystal. "That is enough," he roared, his face contorted. He was not a sophisticated negotiator. He was a bully, and his primary tool was brute force. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the stone floor. "You ungrateful, trespassing little—" He pointed a thick, trembling finger at me. "Security! Get security in here now!" The room erupted. Guests were pushing back their chairs. A wave of confusion and fear. My father was on his feet, pleading. "Charles, no, wait, please. She's just upset. She's not—" Miles was staring at me, his face a mask of pale, horrified disbelief. "Quinn, what? What are you talking about? A manual override?" "Security!" Charles bellowed again, toward the main entrance. Two large men in dark suits, who had been standing discreetly by the door, immediately began moving toward our table. They were professional. They were moving fast. The room dissolved into chaos. I did not move. I did not stand. I did not resist. While my father pleaded and Charles raged, while the security men closed the distance, I reached into the pocket of my wool dress. My fingers found my phone. I unlocked it, my thumb steady. The security guard was 3 steps away. He was big. His hand was already reaching for my shoulder. My father saw the phone. "Quinn, no, don't, please, don't, I'm begging you." I ignored him. My thumbs moved over the screen. The recipient was a contact I had not used in 6 years, a contact I had sworn I would never use, but it was a contact I had memorized, like a fail-safe code. Jonas Rourke. The security guard's hand clamped down on my shoulder. "Ma'am, you need to come with us, now." I typed a single line, a short, precise query. "If you still want to see the Rourke in me, come to Summit now." I hit send. The guard's grip tightened, his fingers digging into my muscle. "Ma'am, let's go." "That's fine," I said. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. I stood up, calmly, and slid the strap of my heavy canvas bag onto my shoulder. I looked at Evelyn. Her face was a mask of pure, cold hatred. She had lost control, and she knew it. I looked at Miles. He was just lost. Then I turned and let the guard escort me out of the room. My father's desperate "Quinn!" echoing behind me as the thunder cracked, shaking the entire building. The security guard's hand was a vice on my shoulder. His fingers dug into the muscle, a blunt, physical statement of control. "Let's go, ma'am. No trouble." The room was a chaos of sharp, panicked noises. My father was babbling. "Please, Charles, she's overwrought. She doesn't know." Charles Harrow was bellowing for them to get her out. Get her out of my club. Guests were standing, a sea of confused, indignant, and frightened faces. A perfect tableau of wealth interrupted. And then I heard it. It was not the thunder, which had been a low rumble. This was different. This was a sound beneath the storm. A deep, rhythmic, percussive whomp, whomp, whomp that was not so much heard as felt. A vibration coming up through the stone floor, rattling the crystal glasses left on the table. The security guard, the one holding me, paused. He looked confused. He, like everyone else, was programmed for this environment. An unruly guest, a drunken scene. He was not programmed for this. The sound grew, swallowing the piano music. It was a physical pressure, building in the air, making the 40-foot windows shudder in their frames. "What in God's name is that?" the senator at the table asked, looking up. "It's the storm," Evelyn said, her voice tight, but her eyes were wide, uncertain. "That's not the storm," I said, very quietly. And then the world outside the windows ignited. A single, blindingly white circle of light cut through the driving snow, sweeping across the lawn, then moving higher. It flashed across the dining room. A strobe light from heaven. illuminating the guests in stark, terrified relief. It was a searchlight, aimed from the sky. A massive, dark shape descended, resolving itself from the blizzard. It was a helicopter, not a sleek, corporate toy for sightseeing. This was a Sikorsky, a heavy-duty, industrial beast, painted matte black, with the single stark white R of Rourke Renewables on the tail. It did not land politely on the helipad 100 yards away. It descended directly onto the snow-covered lawn, 30 feet from the dining room windows. A brutal, arrogant assertion of power. The rotor wash was a hurricane. It hit the side of the building like a physical fist. The perfectly arranged pine trees at the edge of the patio bent sideways, their needles ripped away. The sound was deaf-sodding, an all-consuming roar of turbines and beating air that screamed, "I am here, and I am more important than your dessert." The side door of the helicopter slid open. The wind and snow were a vortex, a blizzard inside a blizzard. A figure appeared in the doorway. He did not climb down. He stepped out, onto the lawn, as if dismounting a horse. Jonas Rourke. He wore no hat. His silver hair was whipped by the rotor wash, but he did not flinch. He was wearing a heavy, dark wool greatcoat, the kind a man wears to survey a work site in the teeth of a gale. He stood for a second, a statue in the center of a hurricane, his eyes scanning the building. He saw the dining room, the shocked faces peering out. The security guard's hand fell from my shoulder. He had, without thinking, taken a step back. Jonas walked toward the club. He moved with a slow, deliberate, unstoppable force. He ignored Charles Harrow, who was standing by the window, his mouth open. He ignored Evelyn, who looked, for the first time in her life, like she was witnessing an event she could not manage, package, or spin. He walked straight to the glass doors that led to the patio. A guest, a young man, fumbled with the lock and pulled them open, as if compelled. The sound of the helicopter and the storm exploded into the room. A physical wave of ice, air, and noise. It ripped napkins from the tables. It sent the spun sugar dessert cages skittering across the floor. It extinguished the massive fire in the hearth, sucking the smoke and embers back into the room in a cloud of ash. Jonas stepped inside. The doors closed behind him. The sound was muted, but the presence of the man was louder than the machine. He did not look at me, not yet. His eyes, the color of wet steel, found my father. Patrick Delaney looked like he had seen a ghost. He was shaking, his face a sickly gray. He looked, in that moment, exactly what he was, a small, weak man, cornered by a predator he had long forgotten. Jonas stopped in front of him. He was a foot taller than my father, a mountain of quiet, raw power. "Patrick," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a diamond. He looked at my father's weak, trembling form, a look of profound, ancient disappointment. "I told my son-in-law," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I told you, to teach her that silence has value, that it's a shield." He took a step closer, forcing my father to look up at him. "But for whose benefit did you teach it? Patrick? Hers? Or yours?" My father had no answer. He could not speak. He just crumpled. Not physically, but spiritually. He was undone. Only then did Jonas Rourke turn to me. He looked at me, standing there with my canvas bag on my shoulder. He looked at the two security guards, who were now trying to blend in with the walls. He looked at the chaos I had created. He did not smile, but his eyes, for the first time, were not cold. They were approving. He held out a large, gloved hand. It was a working man's hand, rough and calloused. "Quinn," he said, "get in. We are taking the truth to the papers by sunrise." The room imploded. "Jonas, you have no right," Charles Harrow sputtered, his face purple, his bully bluster returning. "This is private property. I'll have you arrested for—" "You will do nothing," Jonas said, not even turning to look at him. "You will sit there, and you will be quiet." Evelyn was the first to recover. Her face was not angry. It was something far more terrifying. It was calculating. She was already running the numbers, processing this new, overwhelming data. She was weighing her options. Her next move, the PR fallout of a man who could land a blizzard-proof helicopter on her lawn. She was silent, but her mind was spinning, and I knew she was the most dangerous person in the room. "Quinn!" It was Miles. He lurched forward, pushing past a senator, his face a mask of desperate, pale confusion. His family's reflex had failed him, and now he was trying to correct the error. "Quinn, wait. I'll come with you. I didn't know. I'll come with you." He was trying to fix it. He was trying to be the man who runs into the fire. He was trying to follow me. I stopped. I looked at him. I felt not anger, not disappointment, just a cold, clear, engineering assessment. "No, Miles," I said. You can't come with me." "But I want to help. I'm on your side." "Then help," I said, my voice soft. "You can't fix this by following me. You have to choose. You can stay here and be their son, or you can stay here and find the right way to fix this, using your own voice. But this ride isn't for you." I had told him to choose his own side. I had given him his own problem to solve. He looked stunned, as if I had just handed him a complex, unsolvable equation. "Quinn!" It was my father. He lunged, his desperation making him reckless, and he grabbed my arm. His fingers were like claws. "No, you can't. You are a Delaney. You are my daughter, too. You will not do this. You will not ruin this dinner." This dinner. The smallness of it, the pathetic, grasping need. It broke the last thread of my anger. I looked down at his hand, his white-knuckled grip on my arm. Then I looked up, into his terrified, broken eyes. "I'm not ruining the dinner. Dad," I said, my voice very quiet. I did not pull my arm away. I simply covered his hand with my own. "I'm just pulling the tablecloth. We're about to see who's still standing when all the crystal hits the floor." I gently detached his fingers from my arm. He let me go. I turned. I walked past the security guards, who parted from me as if I were royalty. I walked past Jonas, toward the open doors. I stepped out into the hurricane. The force of the rotor wash was a physical blow. It was a wall of ice and air, screaming in my ears. The snow was not falling. It was moving sideways, a horizontal blizzard of ice pellets that stung my face. I walked across the vibrating lawn, my flat shoes sinking into the snow, my head down, my hand gripping the strap of my canvas bag. I reached the helicopter and climbed in. Jonas was right behind me. He reached up and slammed the heavy door shut. The silence was instantaneous. It was the most profound, absolute silence I have ever experienced. The turbines were a high-pitched, distant whine. The roar of the rotors was a deep, muted thrumming, a feeling more than a sound. The blizzard, the enraged party, the entire world was gone. We were in a sealed, functional, metal womb. The cabin was not luxurious. It was a work machine. It was filled with secured screens, racks of equipment, and two grim-faced men in the pilot's seats, bathed in the green glow of the instrument panels. The helicopter did not waste time. It leapt off the ground, a vertical, gut-wrenching ascent. I looked down. Once, the Summit Ridge Club was already falling away, a brightly lit model in a snow globe. As I watched, the downdraft we had created hit the club's grand, flood-lit entrance, a long silk banner, the one that read, "Evelyn Harrow's Clean Mountain Fund," was ripped from its moorings, the festive ribbons tied to the pillars. They were torn free, spinning away into the darkness like confetti. We banked hard and entered the clouds, the world outside turning to a rushing, abstract gray. Jonas Rourke said nothing for a full minute. He just sat, strapped into the seat opposite me, watching me. His coat was damp, and he smelled of cold air and iron. I just sat there, my hands clasped to my bag, My adrenaline was so high I could barely feel my fingers. Finally, he reached into the deep pocket of his greatcoat. He did not pull out a phone or a weapon. He pulled out a simple, thick, manila envelope. It was sealed, not with glue, but with a circle of dark red wax, stamped with a simple R. He handed it to me. "I signed this," he said, his voice a low rumble. "About an hour ago, while I was waiting for your signal." My fingers were numb as I took it. "What is it?" "Insurance," he said. "I was hoping you would never need it. I was hoping, for your mother's sake, you would stay quiet, stay clear of all this, be happy." I broke the wax seal. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline starting to ebb, leaving the cold behind. I pulled out a sheaf of thick, legal bond paper. It was not a check, it was a legal charter. "The Rourke Clearwater Integrity Trust," I read aloud, the words tasting strange. "It's a discretionary trust," Jonas said, his eyes fixed on my face, watching me process. "A weapon, it's funded, heavily, but it's locked." "Locked? I don't—" "It activates under one condition, and one condition only," he said. "It activates and gives you, as the sole trustee, full, liquid control of its assets. The moment you engage in a verifiable act of truth-telling, an act that results in significant, immediate personal, professional, or financial risk, and is undertaken against the express interests of your immediate family or social circle." I stared at him, the pages trembling. You were testing me?" "No," he said, his voice hard. "I was arming you, but I couldn't tell you where the weapon was. You had to choose to fight with your bare hands first, because you believed in the fight. You couldn't be bought, not even by me." He leaned forward, the green light from the cockpit illuminating the sharp planes of his face. "You chose, you sent the signal. The trust is now active. So, show me what you've got. Show me the data." I unzipped the side pocket of my canvas bag. I reached in and pulled out the small, black encrypted USB drive. "I have the data," I said, my voice finally steady. "I have it all." The helicopter cabin was a bubble of focused, green-lit calm. Suspended in the gray chaos of the storm, we were climbing, punching through the turbulence. Jonas plugged my encrypted USB drive into a hardened terminal built into the bulkhead. The screen lit up, recognizing the drive. "They'll move fast," I said, my voice sharp. The adrenaline was burning clean and hot. "Evelyn won't just sit there. She's not a bully like Charles. She's a strategist. She'll be on the phone right now, spinning this, painting me as a hysterical, spurned girlfriend, a disgruntled employee. She'll try to discredit me before I can even present the data." Jonas looked at the data populating on his screen. "Then we don't give her the chance. We don't play her game of perception. We play mine. We create facts. We build a wall of evidence so high, so fast, that by the time she deploys her spin, it will be irrelevant. What's the objective?" He was testing me, assessing my strategy. I unclipped the steel pen from my pocket. It felt solid in my hand. I started sketching on a notepad from a bulkhead slot. "Three-pronged attack. It's a heist. We're stealing the truth back before they can sign it away at 9 a.m. A. We secure the data. B. We notify the authorities. C. We protect the valley. We have to do all three at once." "Good," Jonas said. He was already on a built-in satellite phone, his voice a low command. "Marcus, I need the water team. The old guard. Yes, all of them. I want them on a secure video line in 10 minutes. I don't care what time it is. Tell them it's a Sierra problem. They'll understand." He clicked off. The old guard were the lawyers who had fought the original water wars in the Rockies for him back in the 80s. The ones who had written the compacts that men like Charles Harrow were now trying to exploit. They were legal knives. "Okay," I said, taking the lead. "A. Securing the data. They know I have something. They will be wiping their servers. The manual override on the dam sensors. That's first. They'll try to blame it on a glitch, then reset it, and our proof is gone. We need a third-party witness," Jonas said, anticipating me. Someone unimpeachable. I have a name, I said. A man named Sal Ramirez. He's an independent engineer in Glenwood Springs. Used to be a site chief. He taught me how to hear metal fatigue. He's old school. He trusts data, not talk. If he verifies the sensor mismatch, his word is gold. He'll need access. Jonas was already on a second comms line, speaking to one of the pilots. Get me a secure patch to a Sal Ramirez in Glenwood Springs. Tell him it's a Rourke integrity matter. And get me the state's lead for the Water Resource Board. Wake him up. While he routed calls, I worked on the terminal. My data was good, but it was just a copy. I needed to lock it in. I logged into my own Stonebridge account, using the Helo's secure uplink, and created a new, encrypted, time-locked evidence repository. I uploaded the full log of my findings, the email chains, the unredacted image consulting appendix with Evelyn's company ID, the side-by-side drafts of the compact showing the 95% reduction in compensation. The log of the change to Section 12, I said, thinking aloud as I typed. It was signed at 7:42 p.m. That's our linchpin. I'm hashing the entire data packet. Shay 256. Good, Jonas said. Make it mathematically impossible for them to claim we altered it. Done. I hit the execute key. The files were uploaded, hashed, and mirrored to a secure server in Switzerland. A digital receipt with the hash string was generated. The data is now a fact. It's sealed. Point A is complete. The sat phone rang. Jonas listened, then handed it to me. Ramirez? Mr. Ramirez? I said, my voice steady. This is Quinn Delaney. I was an intern at the Eastern Plains wind farm 10 years ago. Delaney. His voice was gravel, thick with sleep. I remember. You were the one who could read a contract. What time is it? What's a Rourke integrity matter? It's a dam. The Sierra Auxiliary, Hillside B. I have live telemetry showing a manual override on sensor cluster 4. It's feeding false safe data to the control room. I believe they are inducing a failure. I need an independent, unimpeachable verification. There was a silence. That's a hell of an accusation, kid. I'm patching you into the state's raw feed right now, I said, and I'm sending you the system schematics. If you look at the source code for the sensor interpretation, you'll see it. They're not just lying. They're using the system to do it. Another pause. I heard typing. Holy hell. They're spoofing the data. It's not a glitch. It's an instruction. The system thinks it's empty when it's 90% full. Who did this? That's for the lawyers. Can you verify it? Will you sign an affidavit to that effect? I'll sign it, he said, his voice now cold and awake. And I'm coming with you. Where are we meeting? Stand by, I said. We're in the air. C, protecting the valley. Jonas, we can't wait for the authorities. That dam's data is compromised. We have to assume the worst. We need eyes on the ground. Jonas was already speaking to the pilots. Reroute, first pass, low and dark, over the Sierra Auxiliary. I want a visual. Then, Glenwood Springs, pick up Ramirez. I want a second helicopter. The Bell. I want it fueled. And I want a full-load inspection team. Geotech, structural, and our own armed security. I want them at the auxiliary dam spillway. No, I want them on the spillway. By 0500, tell them to hold the site. No one in, no one out. It's a Rourke integrity seizure. A Rourke integrity seizure. He was, in effect, occupying the dam. He was using his corporate power as a physical barrier to protect the public, bypassing the bureaucracy he knew Evelyn was already manipulating. Point C is in motion, I said, which leaves B, notifying the authorities. We have to create a formal record. I pulled up a fresh document. This is the official request. I began to type, my fingers flying. 2. The Franklin County Board of Commissioners. 2. The State Water Resource Board. Subject: Emergency notification of public safety risk and request to halt. 9 a.m. Sierra Compact signing. I laid it out. I referenced my report from 6 months ago. I referenced the verified sensor data from Sal Ramirez. I referenced the last-minute 95% reduction in the Community Compensation Fund, linking it directly to the manufactured risk. I attached the SHA-256 hash of the evidence packet. "I'm sending it now," I said. "To every county commissioner, to the head of the water board, and," I added a new line to the CC field, "the county press office, the Denver Post, the Associated Press." "You don't just inform them, Quinn," Jonas said, a grim smile touching his lips. "You inform them publicly. You make it impossible for them to have a quiet word with Evelyn in the morning. You turn on the lights." I hit send, the go button, the declaration of war. "The compact signing is at 9 a.m., I said. "This might not be enough. They'll call it a frivolous, last-minute legal challenge by a competing interest. Evelyn will spin it. She'll say I'm doing this for you, that it's the Rourke Empire trying to strong-arm a local deal." "She will," Jonas agreed. "So we prepare the contingency. If they ignore this email, if they walk into that signing room at 9 a.m., we can't be in a lawyer's office. We have to be at the dam. We have to be where the truth is." I looked at Jonas. "Our countermove. If they don't call off the signing by 7 a.m., we hold a press conference, live, at the auxiliary dam, with Sal Ramirez, with your inspection team, and with the live, falsified data on a screen big enough for every camera to see." "A 7 a.m. deadline," Jonas said. He nodded. "Good. It's aggressive. It forces their hand. They have—" He checked his watch. 9 hours to choose, secrecy or the truth. The helicopter banked, the engine's whine changing pitch. We were out of the worst of the storm. My personal phone, which I had left on the console, buzzed. It lit up. Miles. It was a text message. My hand was shaking as I picked it up. The message was one sentence. I just walked out. My mother threatened me. My father. He just sat there. I'm in my car. I choose the truth. Tell me what to do. I closed my eyes for a second. The knot of tension in my chest, the one that had been there since he'd looked at his plate, dissolved. He hadn't just followed me. He had made his own choice. He had seen the system, and he had chosen to break it. "Jonas," I said, "I need to protect an asset. Miles, he defected." "He's a hero," Jonas said, his voice flat. "He's compromised by blood." "No," I said, my voice sharp. "He's the man who, 8 months ago, flagged the first sensor anomaly. The one I fixed. He was ignored. His family. They didn't just ignore him. They used his design to cover the flaw. He's not compromised. He's a witness, and his testimony will be what separates Evelyn's corporate crime from her family. We don't attack the Harrow family. We attack the lie. Miles is the proof of that." I made a note, a new file, Miles Harrow, timeline of internal warnings, compile emails, prepare affidavit. This would shield him, and it would give us a crucial, inside voice. My phone buzzed again, and again, and again, a rapid, frantic staccato of incoming calls. I looked at the screen. Dad. He was calling, and calling, and calling, a desperate, panicked flood. He knew. He knew what I was doing. He knew what Jonas's arrival meant. Jonas just looked at the screen, then at me. He said nothing. The test was not over. I let the phone ring. The sound and intrusion in our quiet war room. I watched my father's name flash, a beacon of his fear, his weakness, his compromise. Finally, I pressed the silence button. The buzzing stopped. I opened a new text message, to Dad. I typed one sentence, the truest sentence I had. "I am choosing what Mom would have." I hit send. I turned the phone over, the screen going dark. I would not look at it again. The snow's stopping. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, clipped and professional. "We're descending on Glenwood, ETA, 4 minutes." I looked out the window. The heavy, wet flakes were gone, replaced by a clearing, stinging cold. Below us, the sky was not black, but a deep, bruised blue-gray. The first faint hint of dawn was on the horizon. 0 hour. Jonas said. It's coming, I said. The game was on. 6:58 a.m. The world was gray, cold, and sharp. The air at the service road of the Hillside B Auxiliary Dam was thin and smelled of wet concrete, pine, and the deep, cold iron of the spillway. There was no music, no laughter, just the rush of water from the main dam in the valley below, a constant, heavy sigh. Jonas's team had been efficient. A perimeter was established. 2 black, unmarked SUVs blocked the access road. His security, men who looked like they were carved from the same rock as my grandfather, stood silent, arms crossed. This was not a press conference. This was an occupation. Our stage was a fold-out table, a high-density portable generator humming quietly, and an 80-inch outdoor monitor, the kind used for high-level site planning. The audience was arriving, a van from a local Denver news affiliate, its camera operator already shouldering his equipment, the reporter shivering in a parka, a stringer from the Associated Press, his face skeptical, his notebook already out. Sal Ramirez, the independent engineer, was already there, leaning against his truck, a battered thermos in his hand, his eyes on the dam. And 2 men in rumpled suits, stumbling out of a county-owned sedan. The lead members of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. They had been summoned by Jonas, and their faces were a mixture of confusion, irritation, and a dawning fear. At 6:59, a black Audi SUV crunched to a stop. Evelyn Harrow got out. She was not in her party dress. She was dressed for war, a severe dark gray cashmere coat, her hair pulled back in a tight, flawless knot. She was flanked by a man in a $3,000 suit, his face pale and smooth, carrying a slim leather briefcase, her PR lawyer. She did not look at me. She marched directly to Jonas. This is an outrageous, unprofessional, and deeply illegal stunt. Mr. Rourke, she said, her voice a low, cold vibration. You have seized private utility property. You have terrorized the board. The cameras were on, the red lights glowing in the dawn. Evelyn knew it. She turned slightly, including them in her performance. We are here, she said, her voice now warming, taking on a tone of pained, reasonable authority. To state for the record that this panic is the result of a gross technical misunderstanding, an error by a, shall we say, a junior third-party analyst. She flicked her eyes to me, a single, dismissive glance. A misunderstanding that we were already in the process of correcting. It was a brilliant opening. She had framed me as incompetent and herself as the responsible authority, calmly handling a hysterical error. I stepped forward. I did not run to the monitor. I walked. Good morning, Evelyn, I said. The microphone on the table picked up my voice. You're right. This is a technical misunderstanding. Let's clear it up. I turned to the monitor. It's 7 a.m. I'm Quinn Delaney, a risk mitigation engineer. Last night, at the Summit Ridge Club, I was informed that a major water compact was being signed this morning. I pressed a key on the laptop. The screen lit up, showing the live public-facing dashboard of the Sierra project, the one Miles had helped design. This is what the control room at Summit Utilities sees right now, I said, my voice crisp, the voice of a lecturer. It's the dashboard for the Hillside B Auxiliary Dam. As you can see, the reservoir level is reported at a safe. I zoomed in. 22%, stable, no risk. Evelyn's lawyer stepped forward. See, as my client stated. But that's not the truth, I said. That is a lie being told by the system itself. I opened a second window, a black screen, filled with lines of code. This is the system's internal log, and this, I highlighted a single, red line. This is the command, logged at 19:42 p.m. Last night, a manual override that instructs the system to ignore the data from sensor cluster 4 and instead to report a static, safe number, the number 22%. The reporter was scribbling. The commissioners were staring, their mouths open. I am not a junior analyst, Evelyn, I said, turning to her. I am the engineer who wrote the original risk report on Summit Utilities 6 months ago, the report you were paid to bury, and I'm telling you, that dam is not at 22%. It is at 90%, and you are about to sign a compact that floods the valley below. That is a baseless allegation, the lawyer shouted. You can't prove that. It's her word against our entire engineering department. It's not just her word, a gravelly voice cut in. Sal Ramirez stepped forward, leaving his truck. He looked at the cameras, then at the commissioners. He was not a performer, he was a fact. My name is Sal Ramirez, he said. I'm an independent PE with 40 years of structural experience. Ms. Delaney contacted me at 0200 this morning. I've spent the last 5 hours reviewing the schematics, the code, and the raw, uninterpreted data from the state's own backup feed. The kid's right. He pointed a thick finger at the red line of code. That's not a glitch. That's a command. That's fraud. And I'm here to state, on the record, with my license on the line, if you sign that new release schedule based on this false data, the downstream residential zone, they don't just lose a buffer. You are removing their safety protocols by a factor of 20%. You are putting them in a designated flood path, period. A new sound. Trucks, not SUVs, old Fords and Chevys, pulling up behind the police line. The residents, people from the valley, the ones I had seen in my calculations, they were holding signs. One just said, "We are not a buffer." Charles Harrow arrived, shoving his way through the new crowd, his face a mask of purple, choking rage. This is slander. Slander. We have our own consultants. The best. They signed off on this. You're right, Charles, I said, my voice cold. I brought up a new file. The invoice. The redacted contract from Summit Utilities. You do have a consultant. A very expensive one. Summit Utilities paid this consultant $200,000 for image consulting on this project. I showed the black redacted provider box. This is confidential business, Evelyn's lawyer snapped. It is, I agreed. But you were sloppy. When you redact a PDF, you're supposed to scrub the metadata. I opened the file's properties panel. The company field was live for all to see. It read, Harrow, Strategic. And you're also supposed to scrub the corporate ID from the appendix, I continued, bringing up a new page. Appendix B, Image Consulting, and here, the federal tax ID number. I opened a final window, the public filing from the Colorado Secretary of State for Harrow Strategic Imaging, LLC. The tax ID is matched. Your company? Evelyn, I said. The crowd gasped. The cameras zoomed in. This is circumstantial, Evelyn said, her voice, for the first time, a high, thin shriek. I am a consultant to many people. It proves nothing. No, Jonas Rourke said. It was the first time he had spoken. He stepped forward, a single piece of paper in his hand, handed to him by one of his old guard lawyers. It proves nothing, Jonas agreed, his voice a low rumble. Except, perhaps, when paired with this, he held up the paper, a sworn affidavit, obtained 1 hour ago. From the lead project manager at Summit Utilities, he states, Jonas put on a pair of reading glasses. He states that he was personally instructed by Evelyn Harrow to adjust the data presentation and bury the Stonebridge report in order to facilitate a smoother community approval process before the 9 a.m. signing. He dropped the paper on the table, a confession. All eyes turned on the lead county commissioner. He looked like he was going to be sick. We had no knowledge. Our office relied. We relied on the consultants, on the community fund. The Clean Mountain Fund? I asked, my voice soft. I brought up a new file, an email. Commissioner, is this your email from 3 weeks ago? The one to the Clean Mountain Fund, accepting a $20,000 community media grant to promote the new compact's positive messaging? He was trapped, caught between Evelyn's corporate fraud and Jonas's legal machine. Evelyn saw her opening, the last, desperate spin. This is a personal vendetta, she screamed, pointing at me, her flawless composure gone, revealing the raw, desperate animal beneath. This is a family dispute, a spurned, unstable girl using her grandfather's thugs, to attack her boyfriend's family. It's a lie. She's lying. No, she's not. The voice was quiet, but the microphone picked it up. Miles. He was standing there, in the crowd of residents. He looked like he hadn't slept in a year. His clothes were rumpled, but his eyes were clear. He walked forward, past the cameras, past his mother's stunned, horrified face, and he stood next to me. "My name is Miles Harrow," he said to the cameras, his voice shaking, but steady. "I am Evelyn Harrow's son, and she's not lying." He turned to me, and his voice broke, just for a second. I was the lead designer on the Aspen Dam interface, 8 months ago. I was the one who flagged the first data anomaly, the one in my own project. I told my superiors, I told my family, and I was told to stick to the color palette. I was told to make it look pretty. He looked back at the cameras, and now at his mother. Then I got an anonymous email, a tip, pointing to the exact, single line of code that was broken, an email that saved my project, an email. He looked at me. That she saved my project, she saved my integrity, and she did it anonymously. He stepped away from me, toward the residents. She is not here to attack my family. She is here because the system is broken, and because the people who broke it are my family. It was over. The lie was dead. The crowd of residents surged forward, not in anger, but in validation. They were shouting, holding up photographs of their homes, their children. "They sold us out! Arrest them!" The county commissioner, seeing his only path to survival, scrambled for the microphone, pushing Evelyn's lawyer aside. The 9 a.m. compact signing is, of course, postponed. Indefinitely, he shouted over the noise. We are hereby launching a full, independent investigation into Summit Utilities and all associated consultants for conspiracy and a gross conflict of interest. The press surged forward, a wall of microphones and cameras. Jonas's security moved to shield us. It was a victory, a total, systemic takedown. And in that moment, a hand grabbed my arm. "Quinn?" My father. He had pushed through the crowd, his face gray, his eyes hollow. He looked small, defeated. "Quinn, that's enough," he whispered, his grip weak, pleading. You did it. You won. It's enough. Let's go home now." He was trying to pull me away, back into the shadows, back into the silence. I looked at his hand, the one that had tried to hold me down. I looked at his face, the face of a man who had chosen compromise his entire life. "I am still your daughter, Dad," I said, my voice so quiet only he could hear it. His face flooded with a desperate, pathetic relief. He thought it was over. "But I am standing with these," I said. I nodded toward the residents, toward the families holding up photographs of their homes. I pulled my arm from his grasp. The chaos was absolute. The cameras were a wall of flashing lights. The reporters a single entity, shouting questions. My father stood frozen, his hand still in the air where my arm had been, his face a mask of gray. Public humiliation. Jonas Rourke stepped forward, into the circle of light. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke, and the chaos quieted. "There will be," he said, his voice a low, soft rumble. "No further debate on the facts. The facts are now in the hands of the press, and they will be in the hands of the Attorney General by 10 a.m. My legal team is already filing the injunction." He turned, not to the cameras, but to the residents, the people from the valley. "But the damage done here is not just about a contract. It is about a breach of public trust." He looked at me, a long, steady gaze. "Therefore, I am announcing, effective immediately, the formation and activation of the Rourke Clearwater Integrity Trust. He motioned to one of his lawyers, who placed a heavy sheaf of documents on the table, right next to my laptop. This trust, Jonas continued, his voice resonating with pure, cold power, which I signed over last night, is not a charity, it is a weapon. It is capitalized with a significant independent fund, and its sole trustee is Quinn Delaney. A new shockwave went through the crowd. Evelyn, who had been silent, her face a mask of stone, took a sharp, involuntary breath. The trust has a single, binding mandate, Jonas said. A legal covenant. Its funds can only be dispersed to projects, audits, or legal actions that are subject to full, radical transparency. It will fund the work of engineers like Ms. Delaney and Mr. Ramirez. It will provide, free of charge, the kind of independent risk analysis that corporations like Summit Utilities and consultants like Ms. Harrow pay millions to bury. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Rourke, why now? Why this? Is this just a power play against Summit?" Jonas turned his gaze to the reporter. His face, for a second, was not the face of a billionaire. It was the face of a man bearing an old, heavy grief. 30 years ago, he said, his voice quiet, I tried to build a dam in the Bighorns. My partner, my best friend. He told me the geological survey was rushed. He told me the data was optimistic. I was young. I had consultants, like Ms. Harrow, who told me the project had a positive public narrative. I told my friend. I told him to be quiet, to be agreeable. The cameras were silent. The spillway failed during the spring melt, Jonas said, his voice flat, dead. It wasn't a catastrophe. It was just a manageable failure. That's what the PR team called it. It took out a bridge. And my friend, who was on it, trying to prove his data was right, I have been building a shield for my granddaughter ever since. I was wrong. You don't build shields. You arm your soldiers. The first twist, his entire motivation, laid bare. And what about the motive for the cover-up? Another reporter shouted, turning the focus. Just the contract? No. The voice was Miles's. He stepped forward again, holding his own phone. No, it wasn't just the contract. It was this. He did not make a speech. He simply handed his phone to the lead P reporter. That's an internal prospectus for the Clear Mountain Sludge Processing Plant, the one the banker was talking about last night. Just look at page 12. Majority stakeholder. It's not a public name. It's a holding company, an anonymous LLC. I don't understand, the reporter said, squinting at the screen. That LLC, Miles said, his voice dead, is the Community Impact Fund. It's the same fund my mother uses, the one she uses to manage her charitable enterprises. She wasn't just getting a consulting fee. She owns the sludge plant. She was signing a contract with herself, using the state's water as her personal piggy bank. The second twist, the final, damning piece of the financial puzzle. It was too much for my father. The pressure, the shame, the decades of resentment. It all exploded. You? He lunged, not at me, but at Jonas. His face was purple, his eyes wild. This is you. You did this. You bastard. You always wanted to destroy me. You always wanted to prove to her, to Ellen, that I was nothing. You set this up. You set her up to ruin me. Jonas did not flinch. He did not even raise a hand. He just let my father rage, a storm of pathetic, impotent fury. You took my wife, my father screamed, spittle flying from his lips. And now you take my daughter, just to... To what, Patrick? Jonas said, his voice suddenly soft. To pay your debts? My father froze. The rage vanished, replaced by a sudden, stark, visceral terror. What? The bad investment. Patrick, Jonas said, his voice low, but every camera's microphone picked it up. The one in Vegas, the one you made 6 months ago, the one that put you $250,000 in debt to some very unpleasant men, the ones who came to your house. I felt the blood drain from my own face. You didn't go to Charles Harrow for help, Jonas continued, because he's your friend. You went to him because you were terrified, and he didn't make some calls. He called me, and he told me my son-in-law was about to be broken into pieces. And Evelyn saw an opportunity. She told me she could manage you in exchange for your daughter's silence. My father was not breathing. So I paid it, Jonas said. I paid it all, in cash, from a discreet account. I bought your silence, just to protect her, just to keep her out of this filth you live in. I did exactly what you accuse me of. I bought your loyalty, and you were so desperate. You took the money, and you still did their bidding. You still tried to sell her out, for a seat at their table. The third twist, the one that broke him. My father made a small, choking sound. He turned, blindly. His eyes met mine. They were not the eyes of a father. They were the eyes of a stranger, a hollow, defeated, exposed man. I walked toward him, through the forest of microphones. "Quinn," he whispered, his hand coming up, pleading. It was to protect you." "No," I said, my voice shaking, but not with fear, with a cold, final clarity. "It wasn't you. You were a ghost. You were a hidden variable. You were a problem I couldn't solve, but I never knew why." I stood in front of him. "I didn't need a silent, hidden protector. Dad, I didn't need you to pay off debts, or make deals, or manage my grandfather. I just needed a father. I needed the man who was supposed to teach me, to apologize, to be there. I needed you, to have been better." He had no words. The shame was total. He looked at me, at the crowd, at the ruins of his life, and for the first time in my entire life, he bowed his head. He looked down at his feet. His shoulders slumped in a final, absolute surrender. It was not a reconciliation. There was no hug. The chasm was too wide. The foundation was gone. The lead commissioner, his face pale, stepped back to the microphone. "Effective immediately. Ms. Harrow is suspended from all county advisory boards. Mr. Harrow's development interests will be placed under immediate and full review." It was done. Miles was still standing by the table. He was watching me. He hadn't moved. He had done his part, and now he was waiting. He had burned his own life to the ground. He had chosen. I walked over to him. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his eyes asking 1,000 questions. I didn't speak either. I just nodded, a single, short, profound nod. "I see you. We did it." He nodded back. It was not a romantic, cinematic kiss. It was better. It was a partnership. It was a signed, sealed contract of mutual respect. "Quinn?" Jonas was beside me. He had a small, familiar object in his calloused, gloved hand. My steel pen, the one my mother had given me. I must have dropped it," I said, reaching for it. "No," he said, closing his hand around it. "You didn't." He held it out to me, but he did not let go. "She gave this to you, but when she was sick, right before the end, she sent it to me, in a box, with a letter." My heart stopped. "What?" "She knew, Quinn, she knew about Patrick's weakness. She knew about me. She knew we would both try to use you, to protect you, or to arm you, to make you a Delaney, or to make you a Rourke." He opened his hand. The steel pen lay in his palm. "Her letter. It was just one line," he whispered, his voice thick, for the first time, with an emotion I could not name. "She wrote, 'Jonas, wait until the day she has to choose for herself. She will know what to do with it. He turned my hand over, palm up, and he placed the pen, my mother's pen, in my hand. He closed my fingers around it. The fourth, final twist. This was never my fight. It was my mother's. I was just the one who had to finish it. I turned to the cameras. My hand was steady, the pen a solid, cold weight. "My name is Quinn Delaney," I said, my voice clear and ringing in the cold morning air. My mother was a librarian, and she taught me that silence isn't polite. Silence is just the empty space that the powerful use to rewrite the lives of the weak. I walked to the table. I picked up the heavy legal charter for the Rourke Clearwater Integrity Trust. "This signing," I said, "was supposed to be a lie. Well, it's going to be a promise instead." I uncapped my pen, and as the cameras rolled, I signed my name. As the first act of this trust, I am announcing a full, free, independent technical audit for any community in this state that feels its voice is not being heard. We will be the ones who read the fine print. The helicopter was humming, its rotors beginning to turn. "This helicopter," I said, "is not leaving. It's bringing in the first team of independent engineers. The real audit starts now." I turned, and I walked to the helicopter. I did not look back. But I saw it, in my mind. I saw Evelyn Harrow, her PR smile, her calm demeanor, finally, totally gone. Her face was a ruin, a mask of cold, hard, unadulterated hatred. She was watching a new game, one she had no idea how to play. I saw my father, Patrick Delaney, standing alone in the slush, his hands in his pockets, shivering, not from the cold, from the shame. I had, as I left, placed one thing on the hood of his car, a small, folded pamphlet, the one from the gambling addiction program, the one the new trust would be funding. The helicopter lifted. We rose above the dam, above the valley. The final scene. It's 6 months later. I'm not in a boardroom. I'm in a high school gymnasium, in a town in the lower valley. The lights are a dull yellow buzz. The audience is farmers, small business owners, teachers, the people who live downstream. I'm standing at a folding table, my laptop open, and I lay my mother's steel pen down on the table. "Good evening," I say, my voice echoing slightly in the big room. "My name is Quinn Delaney, and tonight we are going to learn how to read a contract. We are going to learn how to read the fine print before the world writes it, all over you." And for the first time, everyone is silent, and they are listening. Thank you so much for listening. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're listening from. Let's connect and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.